I have over 170 hours in Pizza Tower, and despite my immense skill in the game, I've never tried to speedrun it. However, this all changed a couple weeks ago when I bought a USB steering wheel. I had initially bought it to play Minecraft after I'd rewatched a video by Technoblade where he did the same thing, but when it arrived I realized that the 2D motion of the wheel would work even better for playing a game like Pizza Tower. 3 days of troubleshooting, practicing, and failure later, and I was ready to take on the dumbest challenge anyone's probably ever attempted in this game. I was gonna speedrun Pizza Tower with a steering wheel. Starting off, I selected a new save and watched the intro cutscene before making a quick dash to the tutorial. This is usually where you learn how to play the game, the controls, and a bit of Peppino's ginormous moveset. However, my only goal right now is to go fast, so instead I just held forward so I could get out as soon as possible. The pillar is about a minute 20 into the level, and the escape sequence is literally 6 seconds long, so I was out in no time. After we exit the tutorial, we can move on to the first actual level of the game, John Gutter. Despite the difference in controller, my muscle memory for this level remained mostly intact, and I was able to get through it with a time comparable to my normal gameplay. One important thing to note is that I had to make a detour in order to grab Jerome, as well as to reach the door to the level's treasure afterwards. Since this is the first level, both of these were in pretty obvious spots, but as you'll see in some of the later levels, the treasure locations will become more hidden and easier to forget about. One quick exit later and we enter the next level, Pizzascape. This level was similarly a breeze, with only a couple small hiccups mixed in with my normal gameplay. The night power up here is the first transformation that we'll encounter on this run, and despite being a bit clunky to use, it basically played the same as usual. This won't be the case for all transformations though, and some of the later ones are a nightmare to control. The janitor and treasure room are also still super easy to find, so we can quickly grab both and leave. After those two warm-up levels, we get to the first boss, Pepperman. This is typically a super challenging boss fight full of attacks that are really hard to dodge, and I literally just stood in the corner for like half the fight. Yeah, so it turns out the first boss in the game is actually pretty easy, and I was able to swiftly defeat him and get the key. Before moving on to the next floor though, I needed to finish the rest of the levels in floor 1, starting with Ancient Cheese. Jerome is a little out of the way in this level, adding a whole nother room that you have to grab him in, but thankfully his closet is still pretty easy to get to. Overall, this is another pretty easy level, and I even managed to pull off some fancy skips in the escape thanks to my practice with the lap 3. I had to stop for a quick outfit change speedrun before making my way to the final level on this floor, Blood Sauce Dungeon. This level is already one of my least favorites in the game, and it's made so much worse when you're playing it with a steering wheel. Thanks to the level being so vertical and twisting, I ended up jerking the steering wheel back and forth every few seconds to make turns, which was very tiring on my arms. Thankfully though, I managed to reach the bottom pretty quickly, and after a quick pit stop and even more turns, I made it back to the top and out of this self-proclaimed hell. While we ride the elevator to floor 2, I just wanted to remind you that if you're enjoying my content, I'd really appreciate if you subscribed. Thanks. Right off the bat, I jumped into Oregano Desert, which has a couple annoying elements. Every topping is located in one of these pizza marts, making them all kind of off the main path. The Firemouth transformation in this level is also pretty slippery, which combined with the steering wheel makes it very frustrating to control. Luckily, Jerome and the treasure are pretty easy to get, and the escape is probably one of the shortest in the entire game, allowing us to quickly move on to Waste Yard. This level's ghost transformation is already hard enough to control normally, but with the steering wheel it becomes even more painful. Since tilting the wheel makes the D-pad harder to press, this power-up in particular became a nightmare to use, as the sections where it's used require you to go in all directions. There was also a weird glitch I experienced where sometimes I couldn't go up and left at the same time, causing me to mess up on some of the parts, which just added to my annoyance. I also struggled a bit with avoiding the John ghosts in the escape sequence in prior runs, but I got lucky this time and slipped by them without getting caught. Fun Farm is a much more enjoyable level in comparison, having the best transformation in the game, Mort the Chicken, as well as some fun level design that I've played enough to fully memorize. The only bad part about this level is the location of the treasure room, which is located completely off screen at the top of this area. I had 3 different runs die on this exact level because I just run by the treasure room and finished the level before I realized something was wrong. Luckily though, I managed to remember this time, so the run continued. Fast Food Saloon is the last level on this floor and it's pretty uneventful. This level is very straightforward and there's not much to talk about. Riding the wieners with the steering wheel is pretty fun though. Now we get to the second boss of the game, Vigilante. This guy is definitely a lot tougher than Pepperman, throwing out a lot of projectiles and being pretty hard to hit sometimes. Thankfully though, you get a gun for this fight, and since my buttons are so sensitive, I was able to spam shots at maximum speed. By combining spamming with well-timed charge shots, I was able to easily beat Vigilante and get the next key. Moving up to floor 3, I started with Crust Cove, which has one of the weirdest transformations to control with the steering wheel. The barrel is controlled by pressing the run button to roll, and since my run button is bound to my pedal, I had to repeatedly press and release it in order to get through these sections with maximum efficiency. Using your foot to press a button isn't a very common thing to deal with, so this ended up being kind of awkward to control at times. Other than that though, the level is pretty quick, leading us to the next level. Gnome Forest is where I started to realize how terrible playing with the steering wheel truly is. 90% of this level is played as Gustavo and Brick, two characters with a completely separate moveset from Peppino. Their moves focus a lot more on slower paced gameplay, with them lacking things like Peppino's grab dash and drifting abilities that allow him to preserve his insane momentum. This is actually a benefit for the steering wheel, as their less precise gameplay meshes well with the less precise control scheme. However, there's a very large problem in the form of these guys' double jump. If you press the jump button in midair, Gustavo and Brick will do a double jump, stopping most of their momentum in exchange for a large height boost and a powerful ground pound. This double jump is a very versatile move when used in certain situations, but thanks to my sensitive ass buttons, my normal jump was essentially replaced with a double jump. This meant that whenever I pressed the jump button, there was a very high chance that I would just instantly lose all of my current momentum and fly straight upwards, something that obviously lost me a lot of time over the course of the level. Despite this very large problem, I still played the best that I could and managed to escape the level in just over 5 minutes, a pretty good time considering my circumstances. After that traumatic experience, I was in a real need for a palate cleanser, and thankfully I was given just that in the form of Deep Dish 9, aka the best level in the game. Getting to play through this level is always a treat, and this time was no exception. Even the rocket gimmick, which is usually pretty challenging to control, was actually made easier by the fact that my horizontal and vertical movement are separated with these controls. For this level, I just kinda turned my brain off and enjoyed the nice little break from all the pain and jankiness of this challenge, and by the time I beat it, I felt rejuvenated and ready to blitz through the final half of the levels. The next level, Golf, actually contained one of the few skips that I was attempting to do in the speedrun. When you get to the final room with Pillar John, there's a skip you can do to skip most of the escape sequence. All you need to do is position both Greaseball and one of the burger guys next to John. Then, before the burger wakes up, you have to run all the way back to the beginning of the room. Once the burger is no longer stunned, he'll hit Greaseball into the pillar, allowing you to simply leave the room and skip about 2 minutes of gameplay. Since this was a pretty easy skip to perform, I was actually able to replicate using the steering wheel, allowing me to beat Golf in record time. After that, we confront the third boss, the Noise. There's something about this guy that just makes me irrationally angry, and I was able to channel this rage into energy, which I used to beat his ass. I managed to hit him every chance I got, absolutely abused my parry button, and overall just destroyed this little dookie gremlin. After beating this man within an inch of his life, I let his wife finish him off and grabbed the key to the 4th floor. When I got out of the elevator, I made sure to carefully avoid Snotty before making my way to Peppybot Factory. Thanks to my many hours spent practicing this level for lap 3, I was able to speedrun it with relative ease. The pizza box transformation gave me a bit of trouble due to it being hard to spam the jump button while moving, but other than that, the level is pretty simple. The treasure room in this level is also, to my knowledge, the only one that's located past the exit door, requiring you to super jump up to this area to find it. Unfortunately, the levels only get harder from here, beginning with the next level. Oh shit! It's pretty well known among speedrunners that this level is the longest in the entire game. It's so long, in fact, that it's literally skipped in any percent runs. This is not great for this challenge because the longer I have to play any given level, the more my soul corrodes until I'm simply a husk of my former self. Thankfully though, aside from its length, this level isn't that much harder to play through with the steering wheel, allowing me to blast through it as fast as I could. I managed to reach the exit in a little over 5 minutes, which actually means it took the same amount of time as Gnome Forest, funnily enough. Anyways, after another avoided murder, we can make our way to Pig City. This level is full of taxis, each of which transport you to another area that contains one of the level's top-ends. On the route I'm taking, I actually skip every taxi in this level except for numbers 3 and 5. 3 because it's on the main route, and 5 because Jerome is in it. That means this stage should be one of the easier ones. Oh no. So yeah, this level is once again made a million times harder by having Gustavo and Brick in it. Thankfully, this time the level isn't nearly as long as Gnome Forest, so I only have to deal with these terrible controls for around 3 minutes instead of 5. Still, those 3 minutes were hell, as I kept accidentally bumping into stuff and double jumping at the worst times. After what felt like a million years, I finally got back to Peppino, fished the treasure out of the toilet, and left. There's only one level left on this floor, but it's easily one of the hardest levels for this challenge. Refrigerator Refrigerator, Freezerator is a pretty hard level to do fast, with plenty of bottomless pits, tricky level design, and every gamer's worst nightmare, ice physics. Combine this with a steering wheel though, and it's easily the most annoying level to play in the game. This is only half of it though, as when you get to the final part of the level, you're granted with the Satan's Choice power-up, which makes you invincible and able to do the screw attack from Metroid. I don't know why, but playing with the steering wheel turns this from one of the easiest escape sequences in the game to the most frustrating thing I've ever had to deal with in my life. Every time I tried to control Peppino while flying, I felt like I was gonna have a stroke. Something about the slippery controls, the slow falling speed, and the steering wheel just made this section a million times harder than it had to be. Thankfully, the escape sequence isn't too long, and I managed to get to the door without losing too much of my sanity. There's no time to rest though, as immediately after we have to fight one of the most stressful bosses in the entire run, Fake Peppino. This boss has a bunch of crap on the screen at all times, and combined with the awkward movement of the steering wheel, it makes it very difficult to dodge a lot of the attacks. I had multiple previous runs almost died to this boss from me just getting hit way too much, so I was really dreading going into it. I must have activated my gaming third eye or something though, because I absolutely flew through this boss fight, finishing it with barely any damage taken and proving that I was the true Peppino. One short escape sequence later and we can finally make our way up to the last floor in the game. Now you gotta understand that at this point I was over an hour and 16 minutes into the run and I was really starting to run out of energy. Having to turn the steering wheel takes a lot more effort than a regular controller, and all of the many hours I'd spent playing with this thing were finally beginning to catch up to me. I knew I couldn't slow down though, not when I was so close to the finish, so I gritted my teeth and pushed onwards. Just a couple more levels and I'd be done. Starting off with Pizza Scare, I had to practice this level multiple times because I kept forgetting where the janitor was. He's hidden pretty far into the escape sequence behind this platform that you literally can't even see. The entire level I just put all of my energy into not forgetting to grab Jerome, and thankfully it paid off as I was able to pick him up and get the treasure. Next up was Don't Make a Sound, and I was nervous as hell for this one. The speedrun that I had attempted right before this one ended because I forgot to get the treasure in this level. The door is located in this room that you spend like 2 seconds in, and I just completely passed it. It wasn't until after I beat the level that I realized my mistake, and I was absolutely devastated. Okay, War. Come on. Do me good. Oh no! Oh no. I forgot the treasure. Oh no, that's it. Oh no. Yeah, there was absolutely no way I was letting that happen again, so this time I made sure to slow down in this area and go straight to the treasure. On a side note, I managed to complete the level without getting jump scared, which is both a time save and a massive flex. The final level in the speedrun is War, and it does not disappoint. This level is probably the hardest level in the game, thanks to it constantly barraging you with a multitude of obstacles, hazards, and enemies. However, it's also the level that I've played the most by far, and my muscle memory was able to basically let me do it on autopilot, even with the steering wheel. I just had to remember to make a quick pit stop for the treasure, and before I knew it, the level was over and I had spent the rest of my money on the final boss door. As I ran down the long hallway, I began to sweat. I had glanced at my timer and noticed that I was on pace to get a sub 1 hour 40 minute time, something I didn't even think would be achievable going into this challenge. I was both excited and terrified at the possibility of getting such a fast time, and I knew I had to go for it. If I were to beat the game within the next 10 minutes though, I'd have to play the best pizza tower anyone's ever seen. No deaths, no mistakes, only one chance. I believe. Starting the fight is the first phase, which is probably the most chaotic out of all of them. Pizzaface flies around, alternating between spawning enemies from the air and summoning them from below with a ground pound. As the phase progresses, each attack spawns more enemies, as well as spawning enemies that are more dangerous. It's very easy to get overwhelmed in this part of the fight and die, which as I mentioned before was not an option. Luckily, I'd gotten a lot more used to fighting bosses at this point, and I was able to beat the first phase pretty quickly despite getting hit a lot. The second phase is much easier than the first, with Pizza Head's attacks being much more spaced out and predictable. I basically just spammed shots as much as I could while dodging until he ran out of health. The third phase is a pretty standard boss rush, with the added benefit of Peppino being pissed the fuck off. off. This means that we only have to hit each boss 4 times, with their attacks all being super telegraphed and easy to avoid. Gustavo even shows up to help you after you kill Pepperman, allowing you to throw him at a boss in order to stun them and get a free hit. By timing this right, I was able to get a couple of quick hits on some of the later bosses by hitting them, throwing Gustavo, and instantly hitting them again. After blazing through all 4 bosses, we finally get to fight Pizza Head one-on-one. At this point though, I was no longer paying attention to the game. I was only focused on one thing, the timer. It slowly ticked up, each second passing signifying one less second that I would have to escape with. After what felt like hours, I hit Pizza Head with one final pile driver, still unable to look away as the time steadily creeped upwards. As soon as I regained control of Peppino, I dove back into the tower, ready for one last escape. It was time to get that sub 140. "1 hour, 40 minutes, and 8 seconds. I was so close to hitting my goal, but I fell only 8 seconds short. I sat there, my mind racing with all of the things I could have done, all of the tiny mistakes I could have fixed in order to save those last 8 seconds. But then I realized, I had done exactly what I'd set out to do. Sure, I may have barely missed a sub hour 40, but my time was still good enough to put me at 73rd in the entire world on the leaderboards. I had played an absolutely crazy run, and for all of its faults, I felt like I had done the best that I could. And for my first time speedrunning this game, I'd say I'm pretty happy with that. You know, I just realized that this would have been a lot easier if I just didn't play with the steering wheel. Fuck.